Hey guys, this will be video 9 for the how to restore a 69 Gibson SG. And it's been a while since I've done a video for this guitar, but I've done an enormous amount of work since the last video. And every bit of the work that I did was just, I wanted to do a video as I was going through all the different steps, but I just couldn't. I couldn't take the time to pull that off. So apologies for it, but now that we've got everything in front of us, I'm going to spend some time talking about it. And I'm actually going to show you how you can make your own overlay and for an actual restoration, not for a fake, but because all this stuff is readily available. And if you don't mind getting behind an X-Acto knife, then you can pull it off yourself. So I'm actually going to go through that process a little bit and show you how to do that. Let's start with the neck. You have seen the neck, I believe. I don't know in this video series though, because I'm working on the two other Les Pauls as well, and I'm not going to talk about the two Les Pauls in this video at all, but they're going extremely well, and I'll follow this video up with a video related to the two Les Paul restorations as well. But nonetheless, getting back on point with this guitar. I don't think I've shown any of this work in this series as far as what has been accomplished here. If I have, then we'll just recap it. So the heel is pretty much 99% finished, if not almost 100% finished. It's very, very close to the historically accurate like 59 type heel that I typically do, but it also has just a little bit more length to allow it to fit in with the actual the body itself and be really beautiful. And I may have shown this. I'm not going to start saying, I don't know if I've covered this or not, but it's irrelevant because it's been so long since we've talked about it. But this is probably one of the most difficult heel fitments I've ever done because the body is so wonky in that it's work. I'm not throwing it under the bus. I'm just saying what it really is. It was extremely difficult. And also it's extremely narrow right here by about 3/32 of an inch more narrow than it really should be. So it was really challenging pulling off this actual 19th fret location as minimum as I could, but also with respect to an actual playing guitar. So I had to steer on the side of more of a playing guitar. So there might be just a little bit of a gap up under this side right here that I'll have to do a little bit of what I call trickery with the binding. But up here I've got it feathered so it will feather in, and it shouldn't be noticeable to the player. But if you put it under a light, you'll see that the heel will fit really nicely, but it'll probably get a little bit tricky once it gets closer up to the top, because right now I can catch my fingernail on that, and that's just going to have to remain. Even if I came in here, if this were my guitar, probably what I would do is do a little bit of feathering in with the lacquer as I'm finishing it, but I'm going to try not to do that because I want this to remain 100% original. So Eric, when you watch this video, if we haven't spoken, I won't be spraying anything up in there unless we looked at it and talked about it and you agreed with me and stuff like that. But where I did do the mahogany fillets right there, that'll have to get stained, and then I'll paint that with a brush or lacquer it with a brush in order to get it all to blend in. So anyway, it's this is just restoring a guitar, building a guitar. This is what it takes. You're just going to have to work your way to the finish line. So the fitment is really nice, and the way I cut these little areas right here, these little fillets, was I just simply cut a business card and put a business card down in there, and then I just clamped the neck in temporarily, and I used my pole saw and just very gingerly worked my way from angle to angle and making certain that you don't slip or anything. And then therefore, when you make that final cut, even if the saw bowed a little bit or twisted a little bit on you, it's no big deal, because once you pull that business card out and you get ready to actually glue your neck in, you'll find that you still have another 32nd of an inch that needs to come off anyway. Okay, so that's the way you work your way to the finish line. And Beautiful guitar, coming together really well. Probably won't be talking about the body anymore, so let me push it over to the side because we got a lot of information related to the headstock and the neck and all that jazz. So I won't talk about any of this shaping right here. All of this is just you're working with what's in front of you. But one thing that is a little bit tricky about this guitar, I'll have to recap this. When you're working with a guitar, and I hope I mention this in a moment. If I don't, I landed this off of eBay. Got this for $25. So trust me, there are deals out there to be had. Plus shipping. The shipping was $7, but I didn't complain about that. So anyway, for $34, I got a circa 1980s Les Paul custom ebony fretboard with Australian white mother of pearl. Frets are still intact, still has the little nibs, which I hate, but they are original. So it's kind of rough, but I did a little bit of cleanup work for it. If anything, I'm going to use it for mock-up purposes and whatnot in my video series. But I actually could build a guitar out of it, but I like the idea of having it on the table to be able to pick up and show you guys, the difference between, hey, what if you went with the white mother of pearl versus the gold Australian, and you can see my fretboard work is about 10 times more quality than what's in my right hand here. But obviously it's rough. It still needs to be finished. But when you're working with really beautiful Gabon ebony and gold mother of pearl, that's the difference. But I like little deals like that, and it's awesome because I can show you exactly what I'm about to show you. Okay, so we know that's our target. That's pretty much the finished guitar. And every bit of this was started from the very front end when we defined that fretboard, beginning of that fretboard location. So if that be the case, and it is still the case, then we should be fairly safe to say that that would probably be the guitar. And the question would be, I'm going to digress a little bit here and answer a few things here. But the question would be, does it flush out well? Yes. We'll flip a little bit. So yeah, flushes out well. Feels great. I can feel the guitar already. Won't bore you with the details, but I can take my calipers right here. I can do a caliper measurement here at the first fret and up here at the 11th fret. And my target should be 22 millimeter finished here. That's 7/8 of an inch. And at the 11th fret location, it should be 25 millimeter or maybe a little bit above 25 millimeter in this state right here, because you could still take a lot of material off. And what does that equate to? It's kind of like a 59 Les Paul. It's just a real sweet taper. It's about a 1/8 inch taper from first to the 11th, and feels great. And anyway, so on that note, we've pretty much got a finished neck lower there, ready to receive the fretboard and all that jazz. But getting that information out of the way, now let's talk about how we have to finish the guitar. I got to get it exactly on the fretboard location because I don't want to make any mistakes here. Okay. The drama is, I'll have to let that drop. When you're doing a Les Paul custom, you have 5 pieces of binding at the headstock. Only 1 piece of binding here. Or if it's an actual Les Paul custom, then you've got a 7-piece binding on the top of the body and 5-piece binding on the back of the body. Okay? So up here at the headstock, they went with 5-piece binding, which I don't understand why they didn't just drop this down to a 3-piece binding. I think that would have been really tasteful, but they didn't. And I will be going with a 5-piece binding, but if you look at this massive, massive white binding out there that's like 90 thousandths, I will not be going with that. I'll be going with the 60 thousandths, but guaranteeing that I leave every bit of the 60 thousandths in. Now I'm showing you white binding here, but everything about Eric's guitar is it's the ivory cream. Even the small pieces in there, that those are 20 thousandths. The white is ivory as well. So it's the exact same ivory cream that I'm showing you right here, even in the small pieces, the 20 thousandths. But when you're getting ready to bind this headstock, you couldn't build this headstock the finished thickness and then machine and then put it on a router table and route down to receive the binding. Make sense? Now, so what you run into is this bind. If you were to do that, well, you would really build a really weird looking guitar, because the binding would come all the way back to about right there. By the time you did that route work, it would come way back here, and it's amazing that that pitch, it'll carry it back all the way. So you can't have that. And Eric is already aware of this, but I'm just making this aware to you guys. And Eric and I have talked about this in extensive detail. How it will be done is it will receive an actual overlay, and the overlay is a certain dimension that typically you want it to finish out about 1/8 of an inch max or something like that. And then once you do the binding, the routing for the binding, well, you'll have that little shelf like that right there. Okay. But the more I studied this Honduran mahogany, the more I thought it's going to run the risk of showing the streaking in it, the grain of the mahogany. And I don't do pore filler. So what I elected to do was do all of my guitars at once. The one in the middle is the two on the left. I'm not exactly sure. I think the one in the middle is for the 59 headstock, which will be the 71 gold top, and the one on the left, it will be for the we think it's a 69 gold top, because it has the P90s. And then obviously the one on the far right will be Eric's SG custom. So all of that work is finished, and it's maple, and I'm about to cut it loose and show it to you. So let's just go ahead and do that. But you can see how I did all of this hand painting, and this took about 7 days to do this. If I screw up this video, I'm just going to screw up the video. But once I do this work, I'm going to move forward. The reason I have this one floating is because you want any overspray from your spray work to just fan in and just barely kiss that side. If you had if you had the logo just right down on a solid surface, it would just start puddling and filling full of lacquer, nitrocellulose black lacquer. M10402225. This is about $22 online. You can get this on eBay all day long. A couple of guys that are selling. It's a great price. Covers forever. And after you do all your black spray work, then you're going to come back with your M113-1406. This ends up being about $22 if you have a woodcraft close to you. And instrumental, but that took close to 7, almost 8 days to do that, because I sprayed very thin coats of black for about 4.5 days over a 5-day period. You only want to spray about 3 applications in a day. Otherwise, it'll get too thick, and then when you're trying to do your sanding work, it'll start creating little rolls, little balls. And the cool thing about this approach that I took here, of this being a maple, it's going to finish out like a holly would have finished out. And also the cool thing about this is, I'll just leave that on there. It doesn't matter. But you can see the footprint on the back. Every bit of this pearl work was done from the back. Well, I say that. Yeah, it was. Well, I did it from the front, but I laid everything out from the back. Okay, because I wanted to know once this was painted black, I wanted some means by which to identify the true center line here and the true center line here. Once I transfer it over and get ready to epoxy this down to my headstock. Now I could just epoxy it straight down to this headstock, but only if I had built this neck longer, so that this get all the crap out of the background. See, if I had built the neck longer, I'm exaggerating, and then I would have been able to have only did the single layer of veneer. That's 1/64 of an inch. Then I could have routed down, and then the route line would have come back about right there, and I would have laid everything out based on that point right there. Did I make a mistake? Absolutely not. No, because if I had have done it this way, I would had to have epoxied or glued in a little triangular fillet right here in order to fill in that void, because you had to machine off this flat surface right here. So when it comes down to building something like this, or building a replica for a restoration, just build it the way they built it in the 50s. And all they did was they just had an individual overlay that ended up being about 1/8 of an inch thick. Therefore, once that overlay comes up to the actual knot location, it looks like an authentic 50s, 60s, 70s guitar, 80s, 90s. They're still doing it this way as well. And then you have the added luxury of guaranteeing that the bottom edge of your binding ends up hitting at that location right there. Okay, this video is worth money because I've never heard anybody explain this on this level. I heard Robert Benedetto try to explain this process to a guy that didn't know anything about guitar building, because Robert Benedetto had done just that. He glued in a little a block right here, and then he surfaced it off with that surface right there. And the kid asked him, he's like, "What? I don't understand. Why are you doing that?" And you could tell he paused for just about 3 seconds. And he realized there was no way he was going to be able to explain it so the kid could understand it. And he just said, "It just has to do with the binding." And that's all he could say. It just has to do with the binding. He did go on a little bit further and say, because you want to make certain that your binding finishes out at the bottom edge of the bone nut. Okay, so there you have it. So that's how I built this neck as well, in order to receive some sort of overlay, but I didn't want to have just the mahogany surface right there. And you might, I can't tell what you can see, but I actually have the entire Gibson and the split diamond drawn out on there as I was doing all the layout. Because I'm sure I mentioned this in some of the past videos, but when I'm working with items like this, I want to cut it right down to the bare minimum. This is only about 3/32 of an inch. Excuse me. No, it's longer than that, because I'm going to have to cut this on a well, it would be, what is this guitar? This is the SG. What did we do? We go 14? Yeah, we went 14 degrees on this headstock pitch. So what is that? 86, 76, 76, 89. Yeah, you're going to want to cut a 76 degree pitch here. Okay, because once you go up to that location right there, what I'm saying, I'm going to go ahead and cut that on my miter saw, so I won't have to be up here with a pull saw trying to cut a line across there and run the risk in screwing up my edges right there. Why? Because this is a stain grade guitar, and let's take advantage of this $25 fretboard. And this is a finished guitar right here, even though it's going to be a dark chocolate walnut colored. I don't want any putty work in there. I want that end grain to be 100% natural and with no damage. So that's why I'll be cutting this on that 76-degree pitch. Is that right? Yeah, because it's a 14. So this will get cut on the 76-degree pitch right there. And then I will have about 3/32 of an inch material left over. I have about a 64th of an inch left over right there. And I've got about a quarter, no, about 3/16 of an inch left over right there that I can run down the table saw and take that off. The reason I wanted to leave that on there is because I have the pitch of the Gibson logo identified with those two marks right there. And then when I drew, have a straight edge. When I laid a straight edge across those two marks, I was able to draw that line, and I knew that's where the bottom of the logo was going to be. So basically, you're just working from what do you want it to look like back, and you want it to look like that right there, based on a certain location that they had everything designed in, and within a certain length and stuff like that. So, see, this one down here will end up getting cut off about a quarter. But that's pretty much the headstock right there, other than I'll be taking a quarter off of that. So a long way around what I'm trying to get at is I started to build all this up on here and on here with just a, well, let me back up. No, I didn't either. I considered it. I thought about just building this up right here and epoxy gluing this down, and then doing every bit of my X-Acto, my mechanical pencil work and my X-Acto work on here. But I did not want to do that because I wanted to have this real nice thin overlay to guarantee that I had an absolutely very precise cutout for everything. I didn't want to have to end up relying on epoxy, black tinted epoxy fill in order to hide any sins there. But I knew that I had to use the mahogany on the bottom in order to lift it up. You know, and you might be thinking, well, isn't that going to make the back too thick? I probably have already engineered it, but let's see. And if it is too thick, then it will be too thick on the back side. And you will now be taking material off the back. And the target is, I want it to be I want it to finish out 5/8 of an inch thick right here and 9/16 of an inch thick right here. So you can see when you're building a 59 replica or replacement, see that taper? I don't have to rely on taking any of the material off the back of this one, but it will be getting this maple overlay right here. But your target is the same thing on this guitar. I want this to be 5/8 of an inch thick right here, 9/16 of an inch thick here, and then when the guitar is finished, then I'm sanding a little bit of material off here, taking it just slightly under 5/8 of an inch right there. Because when you are working with historically accurate items, now, see, that's the threshold. Actually, it's going to need a little bit more material taken off of that. So I've got enough material that after it's all said and done, once the press-in ferrule goes in, it will look like an actual vintage guitar. So regardless of whether you're working with a headstock with an overlay on it that's roughly 1/8 of an inch, well, if that's the case, then if it ends up with 1/8 of an inch on the front and you were using that lower over there, well, then you would have to plan on coming in and taking 1/8 of an inch off the back. All the more reason if you do, and if you're building or restoring a Les Paul custom or an SG custom, all the more reason not to go with the fiberboard, because the fiberboard will give you a false sense of strength and thickness and all that jazz. But once you take an 1/8 inch off of the actual lower in order to accommodate for that really thick overlay, you lost an enormous amount of your strength, and you were given a false sense of still having an original solid guitar. Even if I did. I had to take off additional material for this neck in order to receive this headstock overlay. But it's also Honduran mahogany. It's feather light. It will be epoxied down, so it is now becoming. It is at one with the lower, so it's like you've still got the lower there. And then once I want to know the truth, you could tight bond glue this one down, and it would be just as well as if you were tight bond gluing a fretboard down, because you're getting exceptional sonic qualities out of that. Or it might very well be that, no, I know me, I'll be epoxy gluing that down as well. So the whole order of operations here for this particular guitar is designed so that it will receive a vintage correct tuner with a little bit taller shaft. Okay, your reproduction stuff, be careful with the reproduction stuff. If it's an authentic Clouson reproduction, then yes, it will be accurate. But if it's a knockoff reproduction that looks really good and looks really accurate, it's a little bit shorter than that. You wouldn't be able to do the 5/8 inch. But with this one, and the whole order of operations, the reason this is still just a piece of thin material is because I will be epoxy gluing the logo and the split diamond in from the back side flush with the surface, so that it guarantees that once I remove this from the jig or the caul, that now my mother of pearl is really beautiful and perfectly level and true with this. And any bit of zip sanding that I do is just enough to guarantee that everything's kind of leveled up. I don't run the risk of losing any of my black. I don't run the risk of losing, I really don't run the risk of, if I see black on my sandpaper, then I have sanded off all the nitrocellulose lacquer that I built up. Because that's the whole idea of, right now this has about 7 coats of clear nitrocellulose lacquer over about 3, 6, 9, 12, about 12 coats of black. Very thin. I'm talking very thin coats here, but enough that I was able to sand it with 120 and never got through the black. So I've got some actual mill thickness built up there. And what is this indicative of? Exactly how they did it in the 50s, man. They were painting black nitrocellulose lacquer over a holly. So basically this is going to be very close to 50 specs, but with that Honduran mahogany under it. And the cool thing is, still light as a feather, and it still has a lot of mass. So after this neck is built and finished and said and done, you're maintaining an extremely feather light headstock. That's your true objective. And in hindsight, it would be awesome to maybe have built it a little bit different and easier. But I wanted to do this because I didn't want this headstock to get extended in order to receive the binding, because that's exactly what would have happened. If you shift this back, well, then that's exactly, in order to receive that binding, then in essence, it might appear as though you shifted this back, but in essence, you actually shifted your headstock out. And what would that have done? Probably would not have fit in the case, because I've got it. Let me see. I'll go ahead and put it on the table. I've got the case over here. And these are the parameters that you're working in when you're doing a job for a client. And you can hear it in the voice of the client's really excited about, they found a really beautiful old vintage case, and it's about a 3-hour drive, and you want to share that exhilaration with the client, where they're excited about landing an actual vintage case for their guitar. And then they're even asking you, well, what color is this, and what year is this? And I've always, let me just get this elephant up on the table and then we'll talk about it. I've always been the school of thought the more vintage correct you can get it, then all the better. So Eric, there's your case, and let's see what that body looks like in there. And I'm not losing my focus on what I said about sharing the exhilaration of your client, because that's a beautiful fit. Okay. And that's why our clients spend money with luthiers to build and or restore a vintage guitar, because we're putting this thing back into service. However, my job as the luthier to not let that fall off the table. But to guarantee that it fits, I won't be able to show you, but it just barely fits in the case. It's got about 1/4 of an inch, but had I extended that headstock, shipped it to the client, it wouldn't have fit in their case. Okay, so I went a long way around saying, about your options, but there's nothing wrong with having certain options, but make certain that you know that your good intentions might turn into a problem for a future user. And it wouldn't have really been anyone's mistake. It's just that when you're doing a vintage restoration, you got to think about all that stuff. Let me check the time. 31 minutes. Let me pause. Okay, had to get a drink of water and kind of think about how I want to finish the video in order to help you guys out. When you're getting ready to touch this, obviously everything was based on the pearl that you had. And I'm about to show you what I'm talking about with a mechanical pencil and an X-Acto knife. But right now, and I knew it wasn't going to fit. It's pretty darn close. It almost fit in, or it almost fit. I certainly don't want to break the pearl, but basically what you want to do now is just find out where it's binding. And when I say I have not touched this since doing the spray work, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt it's probably going to be a little bit snug from left to right here, and a little bit snug from left to right here. And you could just kiss it a little bit with a file. And if you lose the black at this point, just use a black Sharpie in order to conceal any mistakes you might make. It might be a little bit snug right there, but be careful trying to come in here and just start sanding all this crazy, because when I did my initial cutout, you can see, that was for that one. Let me see if I can just hold it up there and keep my hand out of the way. You can see that it was a one-step operation where I cut that negative and positive space. Okay, in other words, it was not done with any machine work. This was all done by hand. It's no big deal. It took just about 20 minutes was all. But after that, when you do cut it out, you want to cut it out just a little bit large, but then you're fitting your pearl in there as you're doing that work. And I started to, before I turned the video back on, find out where it's snug, but you can see you got to handle this like a butterfly. But I think where it's going to be snug is just right down here in this one location. And then once I get ready to do the actual epoxy work, I think I've already mentioned this. I did. I'll have this clamped down on a very nice flat surface with like some sort of wax paper or something under it. And then I will be epoxying this in, from the back side, and then just making certain that it's pressed down really well, because I want to guarantee that it's really flush with the front. Yeah, I think I've already covered this, so I apologize for being redundant there. And see, then that will get installed from the back side, the same thing. And then therefore, after it's all said and done, before you epoxy this back on, I think it would be wise, definitely think it would be wise This is hell to do this on camera without breaking things. Let me just do one at a time, but you can see how beautiful that's going to be. And it's going to be a really nice fit. I wish that had stayed in. Let's just take our time. If I'm not careful, I'm going to end up breaking this thing. Yeah. Let me corral myself back because in an effort to try to show off, I'm going to end up breaking that Gibson logo. And if you break that logo, it's hell to get it to not show. And we've all seen this headstock before, but we know that that's what we're shooting for. So with the maple, I'm glad I'm showing this. What I will have to do, because this mother of pearl is about 2.5 times as thick as this overlay is here, I will have to machine down into this mahogany a little bit. I'm glad I showed this because otherwise that wouldn't have made any sense. I'll have to machine off a little bit of a drop in order to receive the pearl. Well, let me back up. In order to have clearance for this to be epoxied down atop this after this is finished, because where I'm going with this, I'm going to do these 3 components first, clamped up, and then guaranteeing that the Gibson logo and the split diamond will be a little bit proud on this side. But then when I get ready to epoxy this down to that, I will already have that location there that will allow this to, fit in and then be compressed together. I may be able to do it all in one glue up, but I don't know. I'm not there yet, but we'll find out. So I'll spend just a little bit of time showing you how I did it, but it's basically just, as I said, with an X-Acto knife and a center line. Let's just say that, let me just do it. I'm just going to guess at this angle. Let me just take it off camera for a second. If you don't know what that angle is, which I'm sure this angle is available, basically just go off of whatever is straight. In other words, the vertical of the B or the vertical of the G, just align that with the pencil line that you drew. And obviously you know that's not the center, so maybe draw a line off to the center, because the center is just at the edge of the S. But basically, all you're going to do now is just take a number 5 mechanical. And it happens pretty fast. I'll do the best I can to show this in camera, but it's, again, I'll be mortified if I break this logo. The pearl's fairly strong, but I don't want to test it. And you won't be going up in between the letters. The tinted epoxy will be filling that in. Basically, you'll just be going across the bottom. You'll just be going around the outside perimeter. I should have already drawn this. I know this is not on camera. I apologize, but I think we all got an idea what I'm doing here. Sorry about the camera, and the light probably just blinds it. And then you might start thinking, okay, now you just start pulling. I don't necessarily pull on it. I just come across it like a punch, and I just is it perforation? I just perforate it. I think that's the word, or perforated. I think it's perforated. I just do little bitty dot punches, and I keep punching and punching my way around the whole logo until I get that right there. And then once I did pull it. I did pull a straight line right there, and I did pull a straight line right there, and around the B and the bottom of the G, but and not even a little bit on the side of the G. But for the most part, I was just punching my way through it. Okay, and that's what I meant by if I had have glued all this up here. Yeah, I would have been able to punch it from the front, but then I would had to have chiseled all that out. When you have your construction paper beneath your material right here, and it's funny if I flip this piece of paper over, you'll see the Gibson logo perfectly punched into the cardboard or the construction paper where I punched my way through it. And then I fit it. I fit the mother of pearl, and then I sanded it. I had it fit a little bit loose, but not so loose that it could run the risk of falling off of the center line. And then sprayed it for 4 days with the black. Sprayed it for 3 or 4 days with the clear. Sanding in between coats. Now you see why I wanted to do all three at once. And if you're truly following all of my series, this was one of the main reasons why I wanted to pause this guitar about a week and a half ago, because I knew I did not want to set up just to do Eric's overlay. I had to be able to set up to do the other two restoration overlays as well. Otherwise, it would have really extended all three projects would have gotten severely extended. So while this project got tabled for about a week, it didn't get any work done on it. Now within the last, and that was, I'm talking like 2 weeks ago, it got shelved for about 2 weeks ago for about a week, but then about a week ago, then I fired it back up, and the other two projects got shelved, and I did all of this work here and all of this work on the side and all that jazz. So I say that to say this: when you're doing a restoration like this, you got to be patient enough to sometimes not work on a project, because at the end of the project, it will have worked out much better. And yeah, it was a little bit frustrating, and possibly even for the client. I mean, Eric hasn't said anything, and I appreciate him being cool and patient. But nonetheless, I think that it works out much better for everyone, and especially for me as well. And this stuff is not cheap, because for every coat that I spray, just know this: that for every coat that you spray, you will have to invert your can and clear the can, and you will spend more lacquer clearing the can than you will have sprayed your material. And that's so frustrating when you're sitting there looking at this $100 lacquer just go out into the abyss and be lost forever. So anyway, it worked out better this way. And a lot of handwork. But as I've mentioned statements in the past before, that's why I joke about that statement. Ease your way to the finish line, work your way to the finish line, be cautious and be patient. Don't be slow, but just know when to slow down, because sometimes that will actually speed everything up. So we'll talk about, let me check the time. 44 minutes. I'll just talk about this. Well, no, it actually is ready for me to remove the tape, because that was the whole purpose of this. And I tell you what, I'll try not to waste time here. How did I do this? I won't even be able to explain it to you, other than every bit of this was done on my drill press with a fence on the back, and full-blown cowboy. I was actually I pulled the drill bit down and held it, and then I moved the fretboard from side to side. And I had this up spiral bit that I was using. It's a 1/4 inch. And but before I did that, I laid every bit of this out with an X-Acto knife. I have a jig that I use where when I was laying this pearl out, I actually had each pearl out of the packet and in its corresponding location. And trust me, do not be embarrassed by putting a 1 right here and a 3 right there and a 5 and a 7 and a 9, because the last thing you want to do is screw up and put your 12 right there, because that would be game over. And then even right here, it jumps. You might think, oh, there's no way I'm going to forget that. But when you're doing a job like this, you're so laser focused that you don't have time to think about the simple things. And that's when you'll make a fool out of yourself and screw up really bad. So with the jig, I'm simply using the actual pearl that is going in the number 3 location. I'm finding the center of the pearl in this direction, and I'm finding the center of that piece of pearl in that direction. And then I've got tick marks all over this fretboard guaranteeing that that is just absolute idiot proof. But by far, the best thing that you can do is just keep 2 frets on the table with you. And when you're getting ready to lay this pearl up here and hold it down and do a pencil tracing around it, and then an X-Acto knife scarring around it, that you just guarantee that it actually looks correct between each fret. Because the number 1 location is not centered between the end of the fretboard and the first fret. It's actually offset towards the end of the fretboard. So you might look at that and think, oh man, you screwed that one up. You got the mother of pearl too far to the right. Once the fret goes in, and you see the actual is that just the width of the fret, then you would lose. I wish I had a fret on the table. You'd lose the difference between just the darkness. So when this fret goes in, the material that I see between the edge of the fret and the edge of the pearl is exactly the same as what I see between the edge of the pearl and the edge of the bone nut. Okay? You got to think on that level, because if you don't, guys like me will find it, because I look for stuff like that. And then when you talk about when it's getting really, really critical, is when you're down here at the end of the line doing this crap right here. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, you're so wound up trying to make certain that you get all this stuff centered within the bay that it can be a bit of a stressful nightmare, and they look really good. So. And the drawback with this pearl, it doesn't photograph very well. So Eric, if you're looking at that thinking, oh man, that it's kind of crappy looking. It's kind of bland and blasé. It because of this. I think this is the blue light or the LED light, whatever it is. I know when you look at this light, it blinds you. It's so bright, but it doesn't yellow. Because if I used a normal, like a warm glow, this stuff would look brown. But it's actually some of the most beautiful pearl I've ever seen. And I absolutely love the ivory. So what's it going to look like on the guitar? You'll see in a few days. But for the most part, it's coming together really well. And the ivory against the mahogany can't be beat. And see what's cool about this, with this 60 thousandths binding right here, every bit of this will roll so beautifully. It'll be like a jazz guitar. Okay. And then this will flush up perfectly like that, we all know. And what do you know? We're right on the 19th fret location right there at the edge of the start. All that was engineered from the front end, so much so that that pencil line that we drew when we were first building our neck is exactly the pencil line that connects with the beginning of the fretboard. And therefore, we engineer the whole guitar out of those 2 pencil lines. And then this width here, that width there, and it works out really well. Excuse me. And if you wanted, Eric, on this one, I could actually leave it 1 in 23/32 inch wide. Or if you want me to take it down to the 1 in 11/16, we can do that as well. But couldn't take it below 1 11/16, which I know we never wanted that anyway. But this one I would not be able to take up to 1 3/4. But Jerome's 69 gold top, we're taking it up to 1 3/4. That's going to be an awesome job, and it's already there. So I'll talk about that in Jerome's video series about how cool it is to get to do the guitar for a guy that's actually 6 feet 6 inches tall. And his dad is called Big Jer, I believe is his name, or Big Jerome. Big Jar. Yeah, I think that's it, Big Jer. So anyway, pretty cool. And I had no idea that Jerome was that big of a guy, but I think Eric's a pretty big guy as well. So it's funny, I'm not a big guy, but I don't have any fat on my hands at all. So I actually prefer a fairly substantial neck when it comes to that stuff. But when you're building guitars for clients, you make certain that you build it for the clients. And because there was one client that I built the guitar for, I never knew it, but he suffered from diabetes really bad, and he was talking about how sometimes his hand movement is just so restricted, and it was better for him to have a really big, fat, massive neck, and it just helped him, I guess, control things better. And so anyway, Ethan, if you're watching, I hope things are going well for you and you're enjoying your guitar. But I'll probably just end the video right there. There's nothing else to talk about other than I wish I could talk about, how do you do a binding, but just go online and read about it. But I definitely use the Stuart McDonald binding cement. That's the best glue out there. It's about $30 for whatever. No, we're only 51 minutes. If you're still here, you're definitely in the building. It's the Stuart McDonald Bind All Guitar Binding Glue. Best thing ever made for guitar binding. Best product ever made. Always keep it stored standing up. Yeah, this is pretty important. Where's my binding glue? Oh. This is exactly how I work with it. Keep a little toothpick there, and then I'd be willing to bet you Eric's guitar that I could push on that just a little bit. And if I've got the top pop, yeah, it's clean. Whoop, there it is. Okay, so there's no air in there, and I learned my lesson by storing it flat like that without all the air pressed out. So make certain that you keep all the air, the glue all the way to the top. And as you're doing your binding work, always keep it standing up. Keep a toothpick by the side to keep that top dripped out. And you're also working with acetone and a brush. You're working with a little small painter's brush and dipping it in a tub of acetone. And you're working with acetone and the binding cement. It's an immediate glue. So, little trick for you right here. I put some construction paper on the bottom of that guaranteed when I was installing that piece of binding. When I was installing, and always, if the binding is curved that way, well, don't try to put it on like this right here because you'd be fighting it. Make certain that you install the binding in its natural curve. And I work from right to left, so I'm gluing in this direction. I can typically do binding cement up to about that point right there. And then it's on my table. Press that straight down to my table. Make certain that I've got a little bit of overhang. And then I get a real nice compression right there. Might as well show this one in a second. And use the little block that we use to do that. And then once you roll up once, have that close by, hold it for about 3 minutes, make certain that the binding is staying down as low as possible. But by putting that construction paper under the bottom edge of the fretboard, even if that binding slipped a little bit, it's no big deal. It is a very big deal if you did not have the paper support under there, because if it did slip even in the slightest, and you were trying to work off this bottom edge, well, that's game over, because now you got a gap. Now you got a gap between your fretboard that has to remain perfectly flat to the lower. truth be known, it would have been safer for me to have installed the fretboard and then done the binding on the guitar. But this was one of these jobs where I've got to do a lot of really dark stain work to this neck. Excuse me. And there's a possibility I'm going to be doing all that stain work first. No lacquer work, but doing all the dark stain work and then gluing this down. And I want to make certain that the bottom of this binding is perfectly flat with the bottom of the fretboard. And I'll be using a flat scraper for that type stuff, but after it all goes together, it'll look like that right there. It'll get rolled and be really beautiful, and then it'll really show up once it's over here on this side. Well, I don't know why I said that. Both sides. Oh, what I was going to say is because of the dots, the side dots and stuff. So that's where you really start seeing the beauty of the guitar. Okay. So what does it take? It's not really just one big job. It's being able to manage about 300 small jobs. That's really about all it boils down to. And using the right product. And certain products would appear to be expensive on the front end, but when I did that binding, when I put the glue on there, it was an immediate contact. I probably could have held it for about 3 minutes and it would have been fine. But typically, it's pretty important. If you're doing this, if you're doing all this multi-ply binding, or you're doing like a 5-ply or something like that, or a 7-ply, that's a different story. When you're doing all this binding, and I do install every one of these at once. All the glue is in there and pressed out. And then as you're doing that work, then you're literally, you have your tape station on the table, and you better have a massive amount of tape because this thing's going to be mummified. Like if you're doing a guitar body, you want to tape every bit of that, because if you just use the glue, if you just glued all these pieces right here and you only taped it in 1 or 2 locations, it's going to swell really bad. And I mean, it's just going to puff up and be really unsightly. So when you do this type body binding, man, it didn't take a long time to figure it out, but it took a long time to get comfortable doing it. But that's a different story. I shouldn't have even brought that up, but I made it sound like, oh yeah, that glue's perfect. All you do is glue it and hold it together. You could not do that with multi-ply binding. Like if I had have had a 5-ply binding down either side of this fretboard, I would have had to have taped every bit of it. But I will say this, the way I did do this, after I did do the binding side, I actually put it on my table saw, and I had really long pieces of poplar, and I clamped it overnight. So it guaranteed that there wasn't any risk of any swelling or anything like that. Because if the binding is a certain width and it swelled out and then you sanded it straight, well, wherever it swelled out, it would visually start getting visually thinner. So it is important, that it's straight. And it is. Okay. A lot of moving parts. Okay, so I appreciate you guys dropping in. I'm just going to stop talking, as I say, and then we'll go from there. The only thing I didn't mention, it's your call, Eric. I think you had mentioned you didn't really care. Since it's the 70s, 69, they would not have had the dot. But I got to tell you, we're doing such an incredibly beautiful custom job here. It's your guitar. I'll do whatever you want me to do, but I would really like to do the dot in the Gibson logo. It would also guarantee that it was done per 50s, like hand installed specs. But if you don't want the dot, it's no big deal. I'll leave it off. But every time I look over on the side, I might send it to you just so it won't be on the table. But I would really like to do the dot, because that would kind of be in keeping with true historical, artisanship of the guys and the girls, the men and the women that were building these guitars back in the 50s, and doing all this type of stuff that I'm showing here by hand, and not relying on CNC machines and fiberboard and crap like that, which when you're running a production company, I know you can't spend 7 days just doing 3 overlays. I get that. But it's nice when you look in the case and you see that dot. It reminds you that it was all done by hand. Okay, so appreciate you guys dropping in, and I'll see you in the next video. This guitar is going to continue to progress fairly quickly, so the next time you see it, it'll probably look a lot more like that right there, if not already have a stained neck that's actually glued in. I know for a fact it probably will already have all the headstock stuff work done and glued down. So because the last thing I want to do is glue the neck into the body, because when I'm doing my router work for all of this binding, I want to have this neck in my hands so I'm over there on my table router. If I had have gone ahead and glued this into the body, uh, it would have been hell. I would have been doing all that with a handheld router, and I don't want to do that type work with a handheld router. I'd much rather do that on my router table. It's much more controlled. So it's frustrating because you're looking at this 2 weeks ago knowing this neck is ready to be glued in, but if you do that, you'll pay hell for it later on by not being able to do this stuff by hand or on your router station. All right, so appreciate you guys dropping in and going once, going twice. I don't see anything else on the table. I talked about the dot. We'll go from there. See you guys in the next video. Thanks.